Hello, everybody. The power of prayer in difficult times. To those of you who won't know me, my name is Roseanna Ruane. I'm happily married to Ollie, and we live in a lovely area close to Athenry in County Galway. We have two beautiful daughters, Saoirse 10 and Farah Rose, who's 3. I'm very humbled to stand in front of you all today and be asked to share my family's story with you all. It's a very surreal feeling, as I myself am still dealing with the emotions of the past 2.5 years. When you hear the term, "I could write a book," well, I really could write one about the pain, grief, sadness, and every other feeling that we have endured as a family over the past 2.5 years. But I will try my best to summarize it for you all here today. I'll briefly go back 35 years to when I was only 7 years old. I had my appendix removed and went on to develop peritonitis, a severe life-threatening infection which saw me have numerous surgeries to save my life. It was a very difficult time for my parents, my mother a nurse, my father a full-time farmer. Even though I was too young to remember much of my illness, I do remember certain things, like the visitors, my mum getting changed in the toilets before she went on night duty, and how lonely it felt when my dad had to go home to my other siblings. I also remember Padre Pio. I was that sick that I received Padre Pio's glove. I don't know if it's my own memory or the memory of hearing the story, but this was my first introduction to Padre Pio. From there on in, I kept a picture of him in my room, and I always prayed to him, nightly. And though I was unwell for a long time after that, I did go on to make a full recovery. I met my husband Ollie in 2006, and we became engaged in the December of 2007. And just 4 months later, he was diagnosed with cancer. This was to me the most devastating blow. We were planning our wedding. We had our whole lives ahead of us. He was only 30 years of age. I remained by his bedside night and day, helping him recover from his surgery. And when I wasn't beside him, I was lighting candles in the local church in the hospital. I turned to God, and indeed Padre Pio, and I welcomed any prayers that came our way. Thankfully, Ollie made a full recovery, but it didn't go without years of worry and doubt. We went on to get married in the October of 2009, and just a few months later, our first girl, Saoirse, was born. She was hoped for, and most importantly, prayed for, and she arrived on the 19th of January, 2012. Shortly after Saoirse was born, my father told me of how much of a miracle Saoirse really was. He went on to tell me, with tears in his eyes, of how all them years ago, a doctor told him in Portiuncula Hospital that I may never be able to bear a child. In hindsight, I am so thankful to my parents for not telling me that until after Saoirse was born. Unfortunately, like many others, we did go on to have our struggles with fertility in the coming years, and we even had a loss. But the want was so strong that we sought help from 3 different fertility clinics, and 7 years later, we felt we won the lotto when our second daughter, Farah Rose, was born. We felt so blessed, especially now more than ever, as we have witnessed firsthand the joy that she has brought to us all, especially Saoirse, over the last few years. We started 2019 on the highest of highs, as Farah Rose was born on New Year's Day. What a better day could you come into the world? We adjusted to life as a family of 4, and after my stint of maternity leave, I went back to work in the September, and the weekly routine began. It was only 12 weeks later that our whole world turned upside down, and this would see us finish the most amazing year on such a painful low. Saoirse was only 7 years of age when she began to complain of a discomfort in her ankle. We felt she may have innocently hurt it at school and brought her to the GP. It was the Friday morning, the 29th of December, 2019. I never, in my wildest dreams, thought we would end up where we did. On examining her, our GP advised that she would need an X-ray, so my husband Ollie brought her to A&E. I stayed at home with our 11-month-old baby and told Saoirse I would have finished decorating the Christmas tree in time to watch the toy show that very same night. Hours later, Saoirse came home from hospital in a cast with a broken bone. She was so upset to be on crutches and somewhat distraught as these crutches were so alien to her. We settled down to watch Ryan Tuberty at his best, and it was a great distraction. But at the same time, myself and Dolly were so relieved that we were only dealing with a broken bone. 2 days later, on the Sunday morning, while getting ready for Mass, we received a phone call from the orthopaedic team informing us that they were looking over Saoirse's X-rays, and because they wanted to rule out a few abnormalities, they asked us to come straight in. Without any further questions, we got into the car and all 4 of us arrived in A&E. We spent the day there while Saoirse had bloods and X-rays taken. We didn't know what to think, but hoped that we would have some answers by that evening. It was decided around 6 p.m. that Saoirse would be admitted. We were told we wouldn't see a consultant at that stage, and that would be the next morning. So with that, we headed up to the ward. It was in the next few moments that everything would become more clearer. As we walked onto the ward, we were met by the orthopaedic team. They introduced themselves, shook our hands, and had a chat with us and Saoirse. In some ways, it felt like watching a movie unfold before our eyes. We were so oblivious as to what was going to happen next. I will never forget Dr. Fintan Shannon's kindness and compassion to us and his delicacy. I was feeding Farah Rose her bottle when he asked if we wouldn't mind stepping into another room for a chat. And with that, Farah Rose was now being bottle-fed by a nurse, and Saoirse gave us the reassurance that it was okay for us to go. As we approached this room, it was only then that I began to realize that things were going to change once we stepped inside that door. And I caught Ollie's back pocket of his jeans and pulled him back as I needed everything to stop right there in that moment. Ollie acknowledged me, and we both entered that room together. And it wasn't long before he held my hand, and we knew then that something was seriously wrong. The tears started to fall as our fears were heightened. And that's when we heard the words no parent ever wants to hear. Your daughter has either an infection or a tumour. But everyone in that room that night knew that this was not an infection. You cannot imagine all that goes through your head when you are told your 7-year-old child may have cancer. We were given time to cry our tears behind closed doors, and then we had to wipe them away and go back to our 2 beautiful girls. We were allowed to bring Saoirse home with us, and the plan was to return the following morning for an MRI. We drove home that night completely numb, but did our best to hide it from Saoirse. Only weeks later, Saoirse went on to be diagnosed with a rare, life-threatening tumour of the bone called osteosarcoma. 1 in 3 children under the age of 16 are diagnosed with this every year. She underwent 10 months of intense chemo and all the side effects that go with it. Seeing an adult go through cancer is hard. It's very hard. But to watch a child go through it is unimaginable. We fought so hard to have our children, and now here we were fighting to keep Saoirse. We were a split family. For every 6 weeks, Saoirse was 4 of them in Dublin having chemo, and Ollie continued to work and look after Farah Rose. It was the most difficult time, and it only got worse, as there was talks of Saoirse having to have her leg amputated. Ollie sought a second opinion in Massachusetts with the help of our GP. This took a lot of time and effort and paperwork, but unfortunately they were of the same opinion, and there was no option but for her amputation to go ahead. At the time, I asked the local priest if we could have a mass for Saoirse. I felt that if everyone prayed, that the volume of prayers would be heard and that everything would be all right. But just days before her surgery, the government announced that these large gatherings should not go ahead. I was gutted, and on the particular evening the Mass was due to be held, we decided to go to the church and light a candle instead. We drove a long, solemn journey up to Dublin on the 17th of March 2020. It was lonely and it was eerie. There was very few cars on the road, no parades. The country had started to slowly close down. And as Saoirse settled in for the night, we watched Leo Varadkar address the public. His words couldn't have been more appropriate. He said, and I quote, "This is a St. Patrick's Day like no other, a day that none of us will ever forget." Handing Saoirse over to the surgical team filled me with dread. How were we going to send her to theatre with 10 toes and welcome her back with only 5? But we did. A strength came over us, and we did whatever it was that we needed to do. It was a traumatic time, but Saoirse made a great recovery. It was slow due to the fact that she was still having chemo, but once she finished her treatment, her wounds healed, and she had her first appointment to be fitted with her first prosthesis. Little did we know how well-known Saoirse would become in every household in Ireland 9 months later, when she appeared on the Late Late Toy Show 2020, exactly a year to the day that she first went to A&E. To see her sit across from Ryan Tubridy filled us with such unimaginable emotion and pride. And to us, it was the highest and biggest reward she could ever receive for enduring such a cruel illness. We started to slowly come through the haze, and even though she attended for review every 4 months, we always carried the worry. We really weren't prepared for what came next. In April of this year, Saoirse told us she had a pain in her chest when breathing. Without giving it a second thought, we made an appointment for our GP, and as we predicted, she was sent into UHG for a routine X-ray. We spent a long day again, having X-rays and CT scans, and at that stage, myself and Saoirse were very fed up. It was late that night when the doctor came back and in a very subtle way ushered me outside the cubicle curtain. Her words to me were, "Do you want to ring your husband to come in?" I didn't see that coming. I pleaded with her to not do this again, as if for some reason she was the cause of the incredible pain. I fought to hold back my tears and reassure Saoirse that everything was fine. Ollie arrived at the hospital, and yet again we were sitting in front of a consultant, hearing those dreaded words again. This time Saoirse's tumour was in her lung. Even the consultant had tears in her eyes. Her second diagnosis completely shook us to the core. We were in Dublin before we knew it, having talks with our oncologist, and because of where the tumour was located, even he himself was doubtful that surgery would even be an option. It all came back, the shock, the depression, that feeling of again grieving the life we thought we knew. What I thought I knew was not the case anymore, which makes you question so much more. My belief, my faith, what I thought I knew. I was so cross with God at one stage. We hadn't fallen out, but I wondered why he let all of this sadness happen to someone so young with her life ahead of her. But I soon realized it isn't God. It isn't any one person. God is there to guide us in troubled times. He's there for comfort, to listen, to heal, and most importantly, teach us something very important, to be grateful. We attended Mass at Clonfert Church shortly after Saoirse's diagnosis, and we were welcomed so warmly by Father Declan McInerney. After Mass, he introduced Saoirse to the statue of Our Lady of Clonfert, and he gave her the prayer which she brought home with her that day. We strongly believe that we have Our Lady to thank, along with everyone's prayers, for the miracle that came next. A few days later, we received a phone call to attend a meeting in Dublin where we would be informed that surgery would now go ahead. It was an extremely difficult meeting, listening to the risks involved in this major surgery, but this was hope. It really was hope, and we grasped it with both hands. Her tumour was growing at such an aggressive rate, there was no time to do any further tests. This time round, Saoirse had thousands of people following her recovery, and when we took to our social media to give weekly updates of her progress, we couldn't believe the amount of people praying for her. The relics, mass cards, holy water, candles, prayers, scapulars, oils are still coming through the door daily, and for this we are eternally grateful. On the night before Saoirse's surgery, my sister arranged for Padre Pio's glove to be brought into Saoirse. A lot of permission had to be sought in order for this to be allowed, and we will be forever grateful to her and to those who helped make this happen. We blessed Saoirse with the glove and prayed to Padre Pio. This to me felt like a sign. History was repeating itself. I was now standing in my parents' shoes, the very same way that they did 35 years previously. Now more than ever, I feel a stronger connection to Padre Pio. So strong, in fact, that I have made a promise to bring Saoirse to visit his resting place in San Giovanni when she's able. I finish up by telling you, I don't have all the answers, but I have seen firsthand how the country and further afield came together and prayed for Saoirse. And I will ask you to continue to keep her in your prayers as she travels her long road to recovery. Every night, without fail, Ollie will say the special prayer to Our Lady of Clonfert with Saoirse. She knows it off by heart, and it will always hold a special place in our hearts. Our story is what it is, our story. But no matter what we've been dealt, we continue to be so grateful for what we have. I'd like to thank Father Richard and for all of you listening today. And I would just like to finish up by saying this prayer. Our Lady of Clonfert, I come to you as one of your children, who will never forget the importance of a woman like you. I come because I believe in you. I come to say thanks for the past and the present, and ask you to bless me in the future. You know me, you know how I live, and you know my needs. Please help me, especially when I need you most. I have problems, worries, and anxieties, the same as everyone else. Help me to cope. So often I would just love to give up when life hurts me and people betray me, but give me the courage never to lose heart. Bless my family, my life, and my friends. Help me, no matter what happens to me in life, to believe, to trust, and to hope. Our Lady of Clonfert, pray for us.